Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast. Whether you are a sales professional, not in sales, but interested in helping people solve problems, or a founder CEO who is looking to grow your business, you'll find practical tools, stories, and experience you can apply to your role. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and I'm here with Mike Simmons, the co-founder of Catalyst Sale. Hello, Mike.
Hello, Jody.
Mike, I'm feeling so festive this week. We've got something I think is pretty special for this episode.
I think we do. In fact, I think we're going to title this one The First Noel.
Now, I'll let you explain that in a moment, and you'll see the tie-in. Our guest this week is Jeff Noel, which is spelled like Noel, so Mike's being clever there. But there's another tie-in too. But before we get going, I'll say that Jeff Noel spent 30 years at Disney. That's an incredible career. The last 15 years, he was a speaker at the Disney Institute. Some have called him the best Disney speaker you've never heard of. Welcome to the show, Jeff Noel.
Thank you, Jody. Thank you, Mike. It's an honor to be on your show, and I look forward to adding value to this podcast and for all the listeners. And yeah, I'm really glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Mike, I want to turn this back to you. Before we get into it with Jeff, you said that this episode is called The First Noel. So why Jeff Noel on The First Noel?
Yeah, so I've been impressed by Jeff's work since I was first introduced to him on your podcast, Jody. And I've read the number of blogs that Jeff puts out. And Jeff's been publishing these blogs since 2009. What's really funny about that is he started on April 1st, 2009. What you'll find about Jeff, if you look at his history, dates are really important. October 31st is a meaningful date for him, and we'll get into that if it makes sense to do so. But Jeff's blogs orient around some things that are really important to me. And we've talked about goal setting on the podcast before, and buckets and whatnot. And those buckets for me are mind, body, family, work. Jeff gets into mind, body, spirit, family health, and work health. And so, Jeff, thanks for being able to join us, and really looking forward to the conversation.
I'm honored. Like I said, I'm honored to have the opportunity to share how I've applied the thing learned from 30 years Disney to my personal life, and how that's helped me be a better husband, a better father, and just find more balance in my life, which gives me a sense of peace and contentment in a world that is literally just trying to steal that away from everybody that walking the planet.
So let's start there. Let's talk about balance. How do you achieve that balance? When someone says balance, or when you say balance, what does it make you think of, and how do you achieve it?
Yeah, just to add context to this, you would think inside an organization like Disney, here at Disney World, I'm pointing my arm over to the right. It's less than a mile from where I'm sitting right now. And inside that organization, tens of thousands of cast members and thousands of leaders, and throughout a lifetime there, you'd think that you would find a role model for balance. And everyone is struggling with this, to gain this feeling like they're not overwhelmed disproportionately in one arena or another. And about 20 years into my career, I realized, I said, Jeff, you've been on this path to find a role model. And what have you got? And I really couldn't. There were some great role models on certain things, but I couldn't find a role model who I felt like they had all of the balls in the air and in a balanced way. And I said, this is a moment of truth for you, Jeff. Maybe you should figure it out for yourself and stop looking. And that's when I began my quest, and I started applying the things that I was teaching at Disney Institute. And at this point, I'd been at Disney Institute for about 5 years. And it really started to come together for me. And I think that the main thing that I would say when it comes to, in terms of balance, one of the first metrics that I just decided to trash was that balance is a feeling that we use time as the metric on how much time do I spend at work? How much time do I spend at home? And I said, I don't think balance has anything to do with time. I think it has to do with energy. And that set me down a path because I had never heard anybody talk about it like that. And that really opened up my eyes to reconditioning myself on what balance means.
Awesome. And, I mentioned the different, the distinctive blogs. So when you think of health, both from a work perspective, a home perspective, mind perspective, body perspective, spirit perspective, why did those five become important to you? Or why did you identify those five as important areas to focus on?
So somewhere in the 2008, 2009 history of the US, there was the worst economic crisis that anybody could remember, except maybe people who had gone through the Great Depression, and they were comparing it to that, or maybe it was even worse, but arguably the worst time in economic history in the United States that anybody could remember. And there was a layoff at Disney, and it was a weird layoff for me. At that point, I had been with Disney about 24 years, and it was one that it felt uncomfortable to literally everyone that I knew the way that we did it. It just was weird. And from that was the catalyst to say, what would you, if you wanted to be prepared should the unthinkable ever happen, what would you do? And I said, well, I'd start a business, on the side, slow and steady, just build something that I love to do. And I thought, well, what would that be? And I said, well, I've been speaking for a long time. I could speak. And then I said, I should write a book. And I said, you were going to write a book when you were in college. You were a junior in college. It was 1979. This is 2009. I'm like, how long ago was that? That was like 30 years ago. You were going to write a book to your kids, about all the things that you learned from your travels, hitchhiking across the country and bicycling across the country and all this stuff that you did. Man, this is 30 years ago. You haven't written the first sentence. And from there, I said, all right, I'm going to write that book. And which begs the question, Mike, what are you going to write about?
Sure.
And I thought, well, if I want to sort of leave a trail and at this point, my wife and I, we're late bloomers. We're like 60 and we have an 18-year-old son. So the path to parenthood did not unfold for us like it does for many people. And I said, well, what would I want our son to know if something ever happened to me and I wasn't around as he got older? And I said, I want to boil it down to the basics. I don't want to overcomplicate this. And I had already created this model in my head, but I just hadn't started articulating it and writing about it. And I said, mind, body, spirit. Everybody says balance is mind, body, the mind, body, spirit trifecta, or work-life balance. And I said, it isn't either or. I said, it's all five of those things, because you take your mind, body, and spirit to work, and we bring our mind, body, and spirit home. So I thought, mind, body, spirit, I call it money and HQ. So you've got your mind, right? We think. You've got your body, we move. You've got your spirit, we feel. And we have our work, which is our contribution to society. And society pays human beings money for their contribution. So if, it's like Abe Lincoln said, whatever you are, be a good one. So when it comes to work, find something that you love to do, be the best at it that you can be, and then learn how to manage your life within that realm. Feel like you're making a contribution, feel like you get to do more than you have to do. There's always have to do's in work, but your get to do should be more than your have to do. And then at home, Mike, you're the CEO of Mike. I'm the CEO of Jeff. It's the paperwork of life. And this is personal organization. We're making decisions every day, all day, literally for the balance of our lives. And if we don't put structure and process in place and get decently organized, things can, I think the degree to which we are personally organized at home is the degree to which stress has a chance to grow and fester, or you have a situation where stress, it's going to happen, but it won't be able to explode and become a thing. It'll just be sporadic and you can get back to normal. So that's what I thought, is that, you've got this notion that how is your attitude? How is your health? How's your spirit? How are you at work? And how are you at home? A very simple model. So that's really how this whole thing came to be.
And one of the things I really like about it, just as you've gone through that process, is the focus on questions. And you're asking yourself these internal questions. And there's not this negative self-talk about, hey, why haven't I started writing? It's, you said you were going to write. Let's start doing it. And as you were describing that, you started talking about the CEO of, I'm the CEO of me and you're the CEO of you. And in the blogs, you talk about reputation being yours to build, and that you are the CEO of you, and that you should consider the trajectory of one question. Do you want to be the best in your category, or do you want to be the category? Can you talk to that a bit?
Yeah, and this, as we're having this conversation, Mike, you just planted an idea in my head that I've never thought of before. I think about brand reputation and branding all the time as a small business owner, and even when I was at Disney, when I worked at Disney Institute, there was a team of facilitators and consultants. And what is your brand? What are you known for? Brand is really, it comes down to this. It's just your reputation. It's the first thing that people think of when they hear your name or see your face. Like immediately there's an image, and your habits and rituals, the way that you perform your work and the way that you approach things, that's the reputation that you get. And the idea that you just gave me, Mike, was that I had never thought of it this way, but really the person that you want to brand yourself for yourself, so that when your self-talk, when your inner voice is talking, it is encouraging and not self-deprecating, or not self-deprecating, but self-defeating.
Yep.
It's okay to make fun of yourself and laugh at yourself, but you really shouldn't be having conversations like, I am never going to have balance. Balance is impossible. It's never going to work. And with back to this notion of time, Mike, let's say I'm going to make just a very general stereotype. I know it doesn't apply to half the people listening here, but it's a very general stereotype that if you are a church-going person, again, this is a stereotype, you're going to go on Sunday. So
Yep.
You go once a week. So how do you balance the spirit if mind, body, spirit, work, and home are the 5 big buckets? I was just like, well, 1 hour, and if you count travel time, you got 2 hours. That's not going to be enough to make me feel like I've contributed and I've, been a generous and forgiving and kind and compassionate person. And
Right.
then I thought, we're on the wrong path thinking that it's got to be a place. I'm like, every step you take every day can be an opportunity to serve, to be nice to someone, to be helpful, to be an encourager. And I'm like, and you can do these things just as you go through your day. And so this notion of, well, I've got to go and volunteer a certain number of hours a week in order for me to feel like, the buckets are equal. And that was really helpful for me. But back to your point, the self-talk really has to be a critical part, self-branding, on how you move yourself forward.
Awesome. I'd like to shift gears here a little bit. And this is a post. I don't remember how far back it was that you had put this. So may have to go in the Wayback Machine from a memory perspective. But you said, praying I don't get handled by a savvy salesperson. Spend a lifetime in sales and you can become amazing, convincing. You may also stay mediocre. Time doesn't equate to experience, but it can. What the buyer cannot tell from initial phone calls, emails, and one physical meeting is how much of the pitch is accurate and how much is inflated or hidden to make the offer the most compelling for the buyer. Praying suits me. I pray every day. And I think that ties into the discussion around faith, but it also bridges this gap that we've got in the conversation between what we're talking about now and some of the people who are in sales roles out there. If you were to give some guidance to those who are in sales, how can they be better sales people and not just pitch for the sake of pitch, or not hide messages in that, or not be convincing, but be more solution oriented and problem solving oriented?
Yeah. So that post was prompted by everything I write is about, I write on 3 topics. What did I learn yesterday? What do I get to do today? And what do I hope for tomorrow? What had happened is I was going through a process. I was approached by a speakers bureau, and oh my gosh. And speakers bureau is going to take 25% of the revenue off the top. So it's a huge loss, but it can also be a huge gain if you don't have to be out there. When you're a small business, you're an army of one, or you've got some contracted help, but literally day to day, you can be alone. And I thought, I'd be willing to go down this path. And the person sounded, they say if it sounds too good to be true. So I was just nervous because it sounded too good to be true. And that's when I wrote those thoughts and in that blog. But I will tell you, to answer your question, what advice I would have for salespeople. And I think it would be very simply this. Walt Disney and Roy Disney were brothers. Roy was the older brother. And in 1923, Walt and Roy founded the Disney Brothers Studios. And they set off for the next bunch of decades working together. And throughout the history, there was this maybe it's opposites attract, but there are two ways to look at profit. And Roy, who was the financial side of the business and Walt was the creative guy, Roy thought profit was the goal. And for Walt, he thought profit was the reward. And I think a customer either consciously or subconsciously can feel which way the salesperson is driven. They carry their quota and, they're proud of their ability to meet and exceed it. And the person they're selling to is just another notch on the climb to that goal. And yeah, I would just make sure that the customer feels like you're there. The sale's going to be the reward, not the goal.
Yeah. And that ties into, some of the things that you said earlier in the conversation, this whole piece about work being the thing you give back to society. It's not, you're compensated for that, but it's not, for many people, it is just about the compensation. But if you're doing fulfilling work, it's not just about the compensation. It's about the impact you can make on others. It's the impact you can make on society. It's the impact you can make on the world. As we think about just this, those who are in some learning, we have a number of folks who listen to the podcast who are in the learning role. And I talk about continuous learning, and I hope that I'm learning new things every day. One of the posts that you had put out there, I had an image that said, "Don't let your learning lead to knowledge, let your learning lead to action." What does that mean to you?
Without action, you've really got nothing. I'm preparing for a speech, an international speech next week, and it's on creativity and innovation and technology and disruptive technology and everything that is ever. So here's the key difference between creativity and innovation. People often put them in the same sentence as one thing.
Okay.
Creativity is the generation of useful ideas in any domain. But if all you have is a pile of ideas, all of that is worthless unless you have the cultural wherewithal to be able to implement one of those ideas so it changes something. It stops something that is unpleasant and/or it enhances something that is pleasant. It can increase revenues. It can decrease inefficiencies. It can improve morale. It can reduce turnover. There's a difference between ideas. Creativity is the idea part. Innovation is the implementation part. And that's really the hard part of anybody can dream up the moon, but who can figure out how to make it work? That's powerful.
Awesome.
For anyone listening, all my blogs are personal. When I started this when I said I was going to write a book back during this economic tsunami in 2008, 2009, I went to GoDaddy and I bought a couple of domain names, for like $10 a year. And somebody had recommended GoDaddy. And then they said, my first folder for blogging is labeled weblog because in 2007, that's what it was called, was a weblog. And then, eventually it got shortened to blog. And I was actually going to my leadership at Disney Institute saying we should do these weblogs and just talk about who we're working with when it's appropriate. And when it's not appropriate, we can talk about the industry. We don't have to talk about the particular organization and share with people what we do. Because also in 2008 and 2009, what was happening was, even before that, people stopped sending people to Disney World for training. I mean, training was one of the first things to go. So we had to reinvent our whole business model at Disney Institute, where in the past, we wouldn't even talk to you if you didn't want to come to Disney World because we're not taking our road on the show. Our show on the road. We're not taking our show on the road. And and then we said, the only way this is going to work is if we take our show on the road. Nobody's coming here. So we're either going to go away or we're going to reinvent ourselves on the fly. And this is the part where we had a bunch of ideas, but until we could implement something, none of it meant anything. And we reinvented the whole Disney Institute model. And from that, where I was going was, I thought I should write blogs to give me practice. So for writing a book, because I had never written a book and I hadn't really written much. And Mike, I had made several attempts. You get all hyped up the first day. I'll see you again tomorrow, and then it's like a week before you blog again. And my previous record was 2 days in a row writing 5 daily, differently themed blogs: mind, body, spirit, work, and home. And on the third, no, this time I mean it, attempt, I actually, to your point at the beginning of the show, picked April Fool's Day because I thought I was going to do a 100-day self-imposed writer's boot camp. I'm going to write all 5 blogs for 100 days in a row. That will give me the practice I need to write a book. Because if you're going to run a half marathon or a 10K or even a 5K or a marathon, you don't just go out and do it. You've got to work your way up to it. So I thought this would be good exercise. And I picked April Fool's Day because I thought I'd be a fool to think if my previous record was 2 days in a row, how the heck am I ever going to do 100? And I don't know how to explain it, Mike. It worked. And I got to the 101st day and I'm like, well, what do I do? My goal's done. And I found that I didn't want to, and I enjoyed it. It didn't feel like work.
Yep.
What I was getting from it was more than I could have ever imagined. I never saw that coming, what I got out of it. And at some point I thought, I'm going to make this be something and people will love it. And the truth is, I don't have the bandwidth to try and market and do all that stuff, nor do I fancy myself as any kind of writer. I just write what I think. I write like I think, I write like I talk. So I took down the ability to share on social media. I took down the ability to comment. I don't promote these blogs anywhere. So none of this conversation is some sort of weird way to go, oh, you should go look at the blogs. I'm not. On the contrary, whatever it is what I would say to people in sales, in anything, is whatever you are going to do, to your point about, do you want to be the best in your category or do you want to become the category? Can you find a way in what you do that is different in a way that inspires you to give not only your best, but to push the boundaries on the way that it's normally done? Can you be a boundary pusher without ever getting any credit or without ever gaining any fame? Just, right? You're branding yourself and the voice that you have inside. And when you think up some impossible thing, you're like, well, heck yeah, I can do it. I've done a bunch of impossible things, and it's only impossible until you do it the first time. And Mike, what I mean by impossible, it's not something nobody has ever done in the world. It's something you have never done. It's your impossible. I think that's also an important way to frame up your world. Is it doesn't have to be something that is the first time anybody in the world has ever done it. Just do your own inventory, do something every day that scares you. And eventually you're going to break through and do something that inspires you. And I didn't come up with this, but people say you only the inspired inspire. And as the CEO of you really should be inspiring yourself with what you are able to accomplish and the creativity and innovation that you use to push yourself to a place that you couldn't. If somebody would have bet you $1 million years ago, you would have said, keep your money. I would love to have $1 million, but I'm never going to be able to do that. As Walt Disney said, keep moving forward.
Yeah. The thing that resonates for me, Jeff, as you're talking through that, is you have to go out and do the work. You have to go out and do the reps. You have to go out and, periodically you'll post a picture or I don't know if you've done any videos of this, but you'll do your L-sits on a dip station, and you'll hold that for, I don't know what your time is now. What are you up to now as far as time being able to hold that L-sit on a dip station?
The record was like 46 seconds. I'm doing about 30 seconds now.
So think about that. 46 seconds, 30 seconds now. Where did you start? Like what were you doing when you held that first L-sit? For those of you who maybe don't know what did you call it? An L-sit? Yeah, the L-sit on the dip station.
All right. I didn't even know what that meant, but so picture parallel bars like a gymnast, and you've got your hands on one hand on either bar, and you're just and your feet are at the ground, and you pull your feet up parallel with the bars. That's an L-sit. And when I first did this, Mike, I couldn't do it for a second, not for a whole second. I could literally get my feet up, and then it was time to bring them right back down. And I didn't say bring them back down. They just came back down because my core was not strong enough. And the only reason I started working on my core, because I'm a runner and I got hurt a couple of times because I was running competitively as a masters athlete, as a sprinter, in my 40s. And I was getting hurt. And the physical therapist said, unless you work on your core, you're going to continue to injure yourself. And I said, where's your core? Is that like in the middle? And you would think I didn't know. So, but yeah, my core's pretty strong for a guy my age.
Well, and the first couple of times that you do it, you'll be surprised at how much your quads will burn. and how important flexibility is. So it's a good measurement of a quick measurement of flexibility, strength, core strength. And as we kind of wind down the conversation here and really get back to one of the main reasons I wanted to have you on the podcast for this episode, this specific episode, many people are going to be going through this practice that they go through each year, where they reflect on what they've accomplished over the course of the past 12 months. They think about what they want to do over the course of the next 12 months, and they start organizing their goals into individual categories. Is there any guidance that you'd give folks as they go through that practice on what to do, how to do it, how to work through that process?
Yeah, I have a saying that I think it's original. I've never heard anybody else say it, but the long way is the shortcut. It's a journey. Life is a journey, but you can't stop. The road to excellence has no finish line. As Walt said, keep moving forward. You always should be moving forward. And you can even have setbacks that will move you forward, because a setback might give you more. What does Michael Jr. say? He's one of my favorite comedians. He says a setback is a setup for a comeback. And anyway, everything that happens, if you have the right mindset and the right spirit and are organized enough to have time to think about this, everything that happens to you is a gift. You can find the good in it. And it's easy to find the bad whenever something happens, but to train yourself in this habit of finding the good. And when you feel overwhelmed, that should be a good feeling. The reason you're overwhelmed is because you're still trying. I would say if a person wanted to follow what I think is a reasonable and simple model, is you do have a mind, a body, and a spirit. You think, you move, and you feel. And you do have a job, and you also have some place where you live. That's, where your mail comes to, where you put your head down at night, where your stuff is. And if you could, on a piece of paper, draw 5 boxes and just ask yourself, what's going well? What would you like to see more happen? And create a list, almost like if you were going on a trip, a packing list. You've got different categories of things that you take on a trip. You've got your toiletries, your clothes, you've got any of the tools or equipment that you want to take with you, all of that, the miscellaneous stuff like any reading material or whatever. You make lists, and these things help you see what's missing and maybe even help you see what you maybe you don't need to take. So I would say if you're going to start out, get it down on paper. If you can't put it down on paper, you're sure not going to be able to do it just making it up. Nobody starts building a house without a blueprint. The best builders know that the easiest way to build something is to start with the blueprint. Know what you want to do before you start to do it. And Be flexible with yourself. Sorry, Mike. Be flexible with yourself when you start out, because I tell my son, he's 18, I said, look, things are either going to work out better than you had hoped or not as good as you had hoped. It's very difficult to hit the bullseye just with the thoughts that are in your head for it to come out just like that. It happens sometimes, but it's rare. It's usually better or worse than you expect. So forgive yourself when it happens worse. Be joyful and grateful when it's better, and try and figure out, do the math on when it does work out better, what was it that I did that contributed to that success? And when it didn't work out as well as I thought, were there some things, maybe one thing what was the sticking point?
I think a couple of the things that really hit the mark for me as you were describing that is that you're not going to be right. Like as you start writing this stuff down, you're gonna forget things, and you're gonna add things that you probably shouldn't, and you're gonna set some objectives that are gonna be way out there, and you're gonna set some that are gonna be really easy. But by going through the practice and learning from each of those situations, and in order to learn, you've got to reflect, you've got to look back, and learn from those scenarios, and to the point that Jeff just made, and the Walt quote, keep moving forward. Jeff, this conversation has been awesome. I am very appreciative of you spending the time and being able to join us. We'll put links to each of the blogs in the podcast show notes. If you wanted to direct people to anywhere in particular, where would you want them to go to learn more about you?
I have to tell you that, and I don't know how to say this because this is the first time I've ever said this. This is like my 4th podcast ever. The other 3 or so were with Jody Mayberry. And, so you're like my 2nd person I've ever done a podcast with, Mike. And I'm not trying to drive traffic I don't sell to my blogs. I don't sell anything there. These are really personal things for the person who just wants to see somebody who is focused. Go to it, figure out, bookmark it, figure out some way to do it. I honestly, I don't sell anything there. Some of the stuff that if you went there, I might even be embarrassed that you read it, but I put it out there publicly because I want to leave a trail for our son. But here's the thing with that is, Mike, I think you know this, but I haven't missed a single day in 9.5 years. That's like 3,600, 3,700 days in a row.
Yep.
And my goal was never, remember I said things will work out better or worse than? This worked out better than I ever thought. I never thought I'd make it to 100 days. I made it to 100 days. And as I kept going, because I enjoyed it, I kept going. And then before I knew it, I'm like, if I kept doing this, I could do like 200 days in a row. That'd be crazy. And then I kept going. And I'm like, if you keep doing this, you could get to like a whole year without missing a day. And I did that. And I just, it made me a better speaker. I did this as I was on the road. Sometimes I could barely keep my eyes open. I normally do it in the morning before I leave to do anything. And, but sometimes I would be doing it the very last thing in the day, just because the morning was so crazy I couldn't do it. Maybe Twitter. The one place where I do share what I think is valuable information is Twitter. And so it would be at Jeff Noel Midlife, MIDLIFE, like a midlife crisis. Yeah, Jeff Noel Midlife. And again, I don't sell anything. My market are meeting planners and executives who want to bring somebody in for a keynote speech or a 1 or 2 day leadership retreat or customer service retreat. So I'm guessing that no one that's listening to this is in that market, but that's what I do and that's what I sell.
Perfect.
Well, and I have an agent now that does it for me. So you can go to thinkingheads.com. That's my agent.
Awesome. We will include those links in the show notes. And Jeff, again, thank you very much for the time today.
You're welcome. I appreciate you being interested, and I hope that some of this, in some small way, will help you and the listeners to think differently about how they approach the things that they do, and that it will be a catalyst for some positive result that they never saw coming.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Jeff. This was a treat to sit in on this interview and have you on the show. So thank you so much. And don't forget to check out what Jeff is up to. His blogs are going to add to your day every day because that's how Jeff does it. So thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Mike. And thank you for listening to the Catalyst Sale Podcast.